Hello, this is Zahir Alam. Welcome you all on Frankly Speaking. Our guest today is Shengman Zhang, former World Bank Managing Director. Mr. Zhang, a Chinese national, was appointed Managing Director of the World Bank Group in 1997 until his departure in 2006. Mr. Zhang was in charge of the bank's operations worldwide, including all its 6 geographical regions and 6 sectoral or thematic networks. On September 2006, Shengman Zhang was appointed Chief Operating Officer of Citigroup Investment Banking in Asia-Pacific region, and he is now the President of Asia-Pacific Citigroup. Earlier, Mr. Zhang held a number of senior positions at the Ministry of Finance in China. Welcome, Mr. Zhang, on Frankly Speaking.
Nice being here.
We remember there's a World Bank President, World Bank Managing Director. You had visited Bangladesh, and this is your 3rd visit in Bangladesh. So how do you feel about the economic perspective of Bangladesh right now, as you saw the trend of economy as a managing director, and now you're working in Citigroup as a private organization, as a bank. So what is the difference, your first visit and right now?
Well, clearly I had the pleasure of visiting Bangladesh some time back, and I'm coming back for the 3rd time in my current employment with Citigroup because of the passage of time, and more importantly, because of the work that Bangladesh has done all these years. I could see visibly the signs of progress and signs of development from, for example, the existence of more buildings, from the existence of more traffic, in particular motorized traffic, and from the existence of better roads. So I think I, as you know, came from a development background, so these are, to me, what I would call sample signs of development. So, and I'm very glad for Bangladesh.
So you noticed huge infrastructural development?
For sure. That I would say one dimension of the progress that Bangladesh has made over the years.
So what are the most critical thing right now under the given circumstances, especially in terms of economic situation? What is needed for Bangladesh right now to take care of?
I wouldn't present myself as somebody who has the recipe for sort of the best development of Bangladesh. That I think would put myself in too much of a high position. But it is true that the world is clearly being affected severely and directly by the
economic slowdown.
Economic recession started with the financial problem. And I think as part of the world, Bangladesh, like other countries in the region and outside the region, inevitably is being buffeted. And I think and therefore Bangladesh, is also being tested. And I think like in the past, it is at a time like this, it is important to both deal with the short-term and the long-term challenges facing the country. You mentioned the infrastructure. I think that provides both a short-term help, but more importantly, a long-term solution to the development of the country. And I think it is important that the Bangladesh stays on that course so that you not lose sight of the long-term while you're dealing with the sort of short-term challenges.
But you mentioned about the economic slowdown or economic slump, downtrend around the world. So how severe is that? How bad is the economic slowdown?
Well, I could tell you, but in terms of economics, if you like, it is clearly very bad, and most people would agree that we may not even have hit the bottom yet. And I think by the sort of the measurement of the economic recession that we have come to know over the last 30, 40 years, this one promises to be one of the severest, if not the severest.
So the measures, the different countries, especially the developed countries, are taking measures to deal with the problem, especially they are bailing out a huge amount of money. So they call it a stimulus package or stimulus plan. How useful or how effective this stimulus plan to combat the fallout of the economic recession?
Well, I think it takes a package of solutions, and I think stimulus package is an important critical part of the whole package. It needed to restore the world onto a growth path, in my view. you clearly, with banks in difficulty and trouble, you will have to deal with the assets issue that are problematic at the moment. So I think it is too early to say whether the stimulus package will have the effect that all would like to have. But it is, and I think, an important part of that. And all countries in the world, with few exceptions, are actually doing that, largely to offset or to restore the balance between supply and demand in the world.
How badly affected you are? I mean, your organization, CitiBank.
Citi clearly is one of those being directly affected, and as you have read in the paper, we obviously had to deal with some of it by raising more capital, by having some government support. And I think but as a bank, I think in terms of capital and other, we're actually quite adequately capitalized. But we do have some of the assets issues that are left over from the past. But I think compared to the others, we're in a better position to continue to not only survive the current crisis, but to go back to profitability.
From the United States present regime and also from the Obama administration, CitiBank particularly received some amount of bailout package. Did that help your moving forward?
We're obviously grateful for the support that the U.S. government has given us. I think it is an important part of our overall strategy to overcome the challenges and to bring the bank into profitability again. Like all the other major global banks and regional as well, actually, we're obviously being affected by the global recession. And I think so the short answer to your question is that we are being affected. We are grateful for the support, but more importantly, we're hopeful that we'll rise again and become profitable soon.
Some recent information is that President Obama unveils his $3.6 trillion dollar budget. Japan's industrial output plunges, Indian economy is in big slowdown, Japan export dropped by 46%, and our export and import trend also in declining mode. And there are huge job cuts around the world. So how do you foresee how bad the coming days are?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the coming days will be very difficult, very bad for sure. But at some point, I think with all the measures that the governments have taken, with all the measures the private institutions have taken, and that you will hit the bottom and start recovering. And all of these are part of the cycle or the process that you have to go through. I think the question is, how do you do it in a way that will minimize what will otherwise be even worse of a cost, and we're doing it with all the countries sort of coming out of it in due course. Because I think one thing that is important for a country like Bangladesh is, as the world adjusts, as the world deals with it, it is not starved of the capital and the resources that it needs to develop.
Do you think this recession will impact the flow of the overseas development assistance from the donor countries or the donor organizations for the developing countries like Bangladesh?
I hope not, because as you know, in my previous incarnation, that was part of the continuous attention that we had. In my current position, that we obviously deal with it more indirectly. But I think there is sufficient understanding and awareness and knowledge of the interconnectedness between developed and developing countries. It is true in a crisis situation like this, there is the danger that number one, in terms of funds flow, that they might go back to sort of the mother countries of these institutions. And number two, there might be the risk of increased protectionism, financial protection included. So it's all the more important as the world deals with the problems through stimulus and all that, that the world rise to really jointly fight an inevitable, I think, rising cause for protectionism.
So joint effort is most critical thing right now?
I think it's critical for countries like Bangladesh, who obviously rely on exports for quite significant portion of its foreign exchange.
I have some basic questions about the slowdown, about the recessions. How we have reached to this global recession? What are the core reasons behind of the recession? Why this problem has been concentrated in this way?
Well, I think and there was, first of all, a bubble, particularly a financial bubble, fueled by the low cost of funds worldwide. And we all know that from Economics 101, when supply is too cheap, demand tends to be quite excessive. And I think worldwide you got an imbalance between supply and demand. Until you got to a point you realize you could not sustain it anymore in terms of the balance you needed.
Where from this problem originated? I mean, in the United States or definitely in the United States?
And I think this time everybody would agree that the financial crisis definitely started in the U.S. And given the size of the U.S. economy, it obviously affects the world to a much more direct way than, well, let's say, any other smaller country.
What about the Chinese economy right now? Because this is a big economy. Like
well, China
India.
is also being affected because China, as you know, has a huge exposure to trade. It depends on export for up to some 40% of its GDP. And naturally, when the export demand is down, it cannot but be affected. But I think China, fortunately, is in a better position to deal with it because of its better foreign balance of payment situation, its huge reserve position, and frankly, also its quite impressive progress in its economic structure and its economic performance over the years.
Mr. Zhang, you know, it's no denying that there has been huge panic, anxiety, fear related with this economic crisis, economic recession. As a developing country, which areas we need to address first? I mean, our big market is in the developed world is our garment product, ready-made garment product. Our expatriate labor market is a significant source of our remittances. So what are the areas we should address right now?
Well, I'm obviously not an expert on Bangladesh per se, but I can see why people are concerned, indeed even worried, because after all, as you put it, you rely on a given and probably limited number of areas for your export earnings, being the garment or the remittances, and both of which I think will be directly affected. Probably you haven't seen the bulk of it yet. It's yet to come. And I think, you know, clearly I'm sure the government is thinking about it in terms of support to the broader economy, in terms of domestic demand, in terms of job creation within the country, because it is a little difficult, I guess, when other countries have to adjust, and it's possible that they may let some of the guest workers go. While the government, I'm sure, will do all it can to deal with that through the government-to-government context. And I think in terms of the economy domestically, you want to see how you can use these people by creating more jobs for them.
Some people are convinced, or they are saying that we are less vulnerable with this economic crisis. But how vulnerable we are? Well,
I think obviously there is a direct correlation between I wouldn't call it the openness, but the exposure of your economy compared to the rest of the other countries. Because the more exposed you are, the more vulnerable by definition you are. And Bangladesh in that regard, I think, compared to economies like China or Singapore or Hong Kong, yes, I think it is less. On the other hand, your capacity to adjust, your capacity to redress, your capacity to counter may also be less because of the lower level of development you are at.
Some questions related in connections with your bank. Why you did have to receive or borrow bailout from the U.S. government or other organization?
Well, first of all, as you know, the last, I think, last 14 or 15 months, we actually raised a total of some $90 or so billion, half which actually came from
$90 billion.
Yeah, came from the private sector. And I think it was helpful that we got the support from the government, because I think the U.S. government also felt that the Citigroup is an important financial institution, with probably what you would call the systemic implications. So we're grateful for the support.
So you're still going for job cut, huge job cut?
They will continuously adjust as, I think whether it is for private or it's for public, then you try to also balance demand and supply. And when your demand is less, I think you have to, adjust your supply accordingly. That we have, as announced, we have adjusted our sort of labor force. And I think going forward, you will continue to do that as the demand adjusts.
Yeah, Mr. Zhang, you worked with the World Bank as managing director since 1997 to 2006. Definitely you worked very closely with the developing countries and extended many development assistance for their programs. But how fair is the World Bank, in your experience, or taking into your experience? How would you tell us how fair is the World Bank's approach to the developing countries?
Yes, I had the honor, the privilege of working with the World Bank for a long time, and I really enjoyed it very much. In the process, I actually learned a lot, because I think, among others, I learned that countries are very different from one to the other. Countries have done different things for different reasons, but all did it for a reason. And I think the World Bank in that process also evolved in terms of its knowledge, in terms of its approach, in terms of its dialogue with the countries. And I think try to be fair, try to be understanding, and try to be correct. But obviously the World Bank, as you know, it also consists of real people. And real people, by definition, are not always correct.
This is a perception that whenever they extend their support, they always put forward so many conditionalities, and that is not really helpful or conducive for the development approach for the respective countries.
Well, I'm sure cases like that did happen in the history, but I think I could say that, at least when I was around, we try to develop solutions that will fit the circumstances of the country. Like I said, sometimes we succeeded, other times we failed, because things, even when you correct and when you diagnose the issue, they became inapplicable because things have moved on. So I think I wouldn't call it unfair or fair, but I would say it's just a matter of evolution. It's a matter of having a better understanding, or developing a better understanding.
Do you see any significant role from the World Bank side to overcome the economic recession?
At this point, I think the World Bank, essentially is a counter-cyclical business. So when the world economy or the country economy is down, there's actually more for it to do. Notwithstanding the fact that had a lot to do even during normal times. So I'm sure they are. I can't speak for them, but I'm sure they are very busy, and busier than in the recent past, because with the continuing of the current crisis, a lot more countries, I think, have extra need, to which the World Bank should, and I'm sure does provide some support.
Everybody is talking about change. Do you see any room for change from the World Bank side?
I think I'm sure there is always room for change for anybody or every institution, and I'm sure they try to learn, to understand, and hopefully to offer the support that's best suited to the country that they are trying to support in any particular circumstance.
How closely you are related with Bangladesh? I mean, Bangladesh.
I always have an interest, because I have to tell you, I am, the first time I came until today, I'm always amazed and impressed how you manage to feed so many people in such a small place. People don't appreciate how difficult and what a challenge that is. And
what impressions you have got about the people and the places of Bangladesh?
Oh, they're very resilient. They're very industrious, and they're very hard-working. It's just, I wouldn't say that the weather is necessarily hospitable, because it tends to be pretty hot. But like I said, on a relatively small piece of land, you're able to sustain and support and really keep so many people fed and moving forward is no small challenge.
Is it naturally difficult to manage all those challenges, developmental challenges, in a place where 150 million people lives in a small place?
I would think so, because on a per capita, well, that's not the only dimension, but per capita resource availability is an important factor in the development equation. But it is by no means the only equation, but it is an important equation.
Okay. Did you meet any of our government senior officials?
Yeah, I'm here. Obviously, part of it is to meet with the government officials. I met with the central bank governor. I met with the chairman of the SEC.
What are the policy support you are looking at from the new government, actually?
No, I think for us per se, I mean, it's more like how we, develop ourselves in the environment that we are. Obviously, there are certain specifics, that instruments, products that we would like to try. But it is not a policy per se.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Shengman Zhang.
Thank you. It's a pleasure
for being with us.
Pleasure being here.
Dear viewers, Mr. Zhang is a well-known and very respected name in the developing world for his insights about the developmental challenges faced by countries like Bangladesh. We have tried to get his insights and assessment on Bangladesh's core competence, its future course of action in economic field, and adaptation strategy in a competitive world, particularly under the given circumstances of economic meltdown, economic slowdown. There is no denying that the world is in turmoil, and we need to take care of this situation very carefully with sincere efforts and correct measures, correct financial measures. We thank you indeed for watching this program, and we invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, to take care and bye-bye.